Neil Rhind, MBE, FSA, a man who always says he needs no introduction. Neil Rhind in conversation and playing the role of simpering Sue Lawley.
You're a bit outdated.
I'm glad you didn't say Roy Plum Dread.
He's no longer with us. It's the lovely Kirsty Young.
That's the benefits of being in the history society.
The only person who ever made me watch Channel 5 News.
I think I'll say no more. I think I'll say enough. We are making a little history here this evening, though, with filming of the event for posterity. Alan Griffin on camera. My son here, Jack Cross, sound recording the same. I do wonder what, and I do hope that, in 100 years' time, this comes out as some crackling cylinder. We take the record. You're happy with your makeup? I pass over to you. The floor is yours. Neil. Thank you, Anthony.
Our castaway this evening is Neil Rhind, the Blackheath historian and long-standing member of this society and its predecessor. The records tonight, though, are, with one exception, not musical, but historical. Historical events in Neil's life as a historian, and key records and sources of information that have had great impact on his researches and writing. I considered using a local image of something that looked like a desert island. I studied many images of Whitfield's Mountain on the heath. I thought that could look like an island, but I would have to have digitally manufactured the sea and the sunlight. So I'm afraid a picture from the internet will have to suffice. And contrary to advice offered to me by a distinguished member of our society, this will not be a John Freeman, Gilbert Harding face-to-face meeting.
Shame. No sobbing, no sobbing.
There's no tears, I hope, except maybe during our piece of music, which I hope works, because so far it has failed to work most of the time, but I'm hoping that it might work this evening. We also celebrate a 40th anniversary. Neil was invited onto the council of the Greenwich and Lewisham Antiquarian Society in 1973 and later served as its president. Neil, I know you were born in Greenwich in St Albans Hospital, I believe.
Yes, I was. The Greenwich Union in Perth.
But I'm intrigued by your connection with St Marylebone. How did this come about?
It's a very complicated story, but we left Blackheath in 1939. My parents made a number of brilliant mistakes in their life, the first of which was to get married to each other. No, I say that quite bluntly and openly. It was a disaster. And my father decided that we should all go and live on the south coast, Sussex, Seaford Sussex. But when you think the Hun was poised to sweep across the channel, we always had the view that maybe he hoped that the Hun would get rid of his tiresome wife and even more tiresome 4 children. We went to Seaford, but eventually, because his business took him into London, he's an estate agent in Marylebone, a small flat was found in Marylebone in which my brother, sister, myself and my mother lived. My brother needed to go to secondary school, so Marylebone Grammar School had been evacuated to Redruth in Cornwall and had just returned and was actually looking for pupils. So my mother then home along took the boy and said, "This is my son, he needs educating." And the headmaster at the time, Philip Wayne, said, "I'll take him in." And as a result, when we moved to elsewhere, I was also enrolled in the school, but it was because my brother had been there in the first place. And I suppose that is the story as far as it needs to be at the moment.
Right.
And that is that school there. Oh yes, I do. Now the main building on the left is still there. It's owned by a large company. But although the school itself closed down because it wouldn't accept the Inner London Education Authority's plans for it to turn it into a Saint school for Paddington, the trustees of the school had sufficient strength to close the institution. They didn't own the buildings, unlike Colt School, who owned the buildings, so the leather sellers were able to set up independent schools. Marylebone closed down, but the Old Boys Club is still going. I'm not a very active member, but I do go along about that. And the nice little Havisham designed Gothic, I should have walked my point out. This bit survives today, very nice indeed. And if you look carefully, you can see on the back wall my brother's initials, under which you will find mine, along with 5,000 other boys.
And this was a sort of golden age of the school with Philip Wayne. Philip was a Blackheath person, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. At the time I was at the school, there were only 2 people in the institution who came south of the river. One was me, all the way from Bamborough Hill, and the other was the headmaster, who drove up from Morgan Road in his funny little Austin living room car. And he never once offered me a lift. With hindsight and maturity, I think he was wise. Because if he'd done it once, it would have got a habit and difficulty. But he was a very important figure in my life and that of many people. When I tell you the sort of man he was, briefly, because we're coming to him later, but he was appointed to the school in 1929 in his mid-20s, good Victorian, teenage headmaster of school stuff. And he had a very good eye for the intelligent boy with no qualifications. And a lot of the boys who came to him, in fact, were refugees from Nazis. And one came along and he couldn't really speak much English, but he changed his name to Eric Hobsbawm. Who, as you know, died last year, the great Marxist historian. I think Philip Wayne would have been appalled by what Hobsbawm did later, but he had an eye, he knew what to look for.
Right. And your first job was at St Marylebone Library.
Yeah, it most extraordinary effect on my life, because when we lived in Marylebone, I was 6, and I joined St Marylebone Public Library, junior department near Baker Street Station. And when it came to my schooling, I really wasn't a very good school. It came out of the hand, sort of whatever we called it in those days, GCE, and the headmaster said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I've always wanted to work in St Marylebone Public Library, in my ambition." And he, of course, being Wayne, knew everybody. Is that Geoffrey Buckingham Stevens, chief librarian? Geoffrey, I've got this boy, he's not very bright. So to say. I think he might well be the sort of person. He did well in history and English. So Geoffrey Stevens took me in. Now the interesting thing about Geoffrey Buckingham Stevens and his number 2 at the time, Elsie Exley, was that they were trained in Woolwich, under the great Woolwich library.
Like Dr. Baker?
Yeah. Oh no, Pre-Baker.
Right.
Pre-Baker, I think.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Geoffrey Stevens, who's the only man I knew who wore wing collars to work, he was there in the 1930s.
Right.
Succeeded a man called Duncan Gray, who I think might also have been from. I mean, Woolwich Library at the time was considered one of the great libraries.
It was.
Beautifully run and organised.
Yeah.
But that's how it all came about. So I went to work at St Marylebone Public Library, where I was very happy because I was in the reference library, and it was my university. I had 3.5 years in time. I had national service in between, working in one of the best public reference libraries in the country. And it's where I learnt my sources. And the people working there, I don't want to be pretentious here, but were cultured. They went to plays and films and read books and art galleries and things. And I was told to get on with it as well. So a lot of my cultural enthusiasms come from that time. Although one I had discovered for myself when I was 14. I was listening to the radio, doing something or other, I tuned it in, and I heard a performance, a piece of music from the Edinburgh Festival, and it was Marvellous Night Symphony, conducted by Sir John Barbaroli. and it stuck in my head. And when I went to work at the library, they had a gramophone record library. I think it occupied all of this sort of shelf space of LPs, and they included one on the map. So I took it off and played it. I didn't have a gramophone, but the library did when they played it, and I realised it was the work that I had done and been very happy with. And I've remained with MSC ever since. Now he's hugely popular, and even Torvin and Dean dance to his song. It was slightly embarrassing, really, but he's one of the great men.
So what led you into journalism?
Oh, well, when I came out of the Air Force, the library didn't appeal quite so enthusiastic, because I could see that if I went off to college, and it was day release in those days, people forget that a great many professionals were apprenticed. Solicitors were you were articled to solicitor, you were articled to chartered surveyors. Architects, a lot of people didn't actually go to a university. And librarians were the same. You went to library school. You usually did a whole year non-stop in order to get through your first level of qualification. And I noticed that the people who actually worked very hard and became associates of the Library Association, and then fellows of the Library Association, people like him. Are you a fellow?
No,
Are you a fellow?
associate.
I'll take you back. Associate. Spending their time organising holiday lists and ordering furniture. Nothing to do with helping the public and book. And I went to an organisation called ASLIT, which was the Association of Special Libraries and Information Bureaus, which was also a sort of upmarket employment exchange for people in the research professions. And I said I was thinking of a change. It's been recommended I should leave public libraries and go to special libraries, commercial libraries. And they said, well, they did have some vacancies, which might be very attractive, in which the National Trade Press was suddenly expanding furiously after wartime austerity. And they needed people who knew how to research, basically, but also had wordsmithing. And so I said, well, I was quite interested in all of these. And I made an inquiry as to what the salary would be, and it was going to be double what I earned from the library. There was no choice. I was penniless and I was about to get married. It seemed a good idea. So I went into journalism for 2 or 3 years on the National Trade Press. Oh, there we are. Yes. Oh no, you can't get it there. Anyway, there we are. We're getting. In 1962, being a sort of eager, sort of slightly left-wing sort of chap, I was a reader of the New Statesman, and on the back it says wanted. Assistant to Raymond Postgate, good read guide applied to Consumers Association, which was the Which magazine. So I applied, and I got a job. I was absolutely amazed. I spent 6 years full-time working for Raymond. I moved on and did other things in Which. I knew I'd never be editor, then I had a staff. And I went freelance about 1968. I worked for them, and anyone who would pay me. Now, I hope this isn't going to cause any embarrassment, but one of the jobs that I organised at the Consumer Association was the purchasing of 100,000 contraceptives. No, I did not have to try that. But they decided they would reissue their contraceptive supplement, which had been a publishing sensation, and very important work in the social terms. But the shopping unit used to buy all the goods for testing for Which were slightly embarrassed. They didn't really want to get involved. So I was asked whether I would recruit a team and organise it all, and I said, yes, I'd be happy to do that. And I would pay the fee, and some of these things were, and it was a huge success. Anyway, that's the sort of thing, but gradually I drifted and did work for other people. Farmers Weekly was a very strong one. I did a lot of holiday week work for Farmers Weekly. But by then I was starting to get interested in things that really matter, like the history of SE3, such and such. So they're the sort of things that I did as a freelance. And I worked with Raymond Postgate. I wrote a little book called The Consumer up in '68 for a publishing house long forgotten. It's only a pamphlet. And then my famous title, which caused a lot of slavery behind that, Made Me Understand Fragrance in Childbirth, which I wrote with the very strong assistance of Dr. Hayes Legan, Michael's late wife, who was immensely helpful and kind, and it was a good thing. But And then I met Gordon Gunn, who was a watercolour artist from Inverness, and I got rather steamrolled into writing a book about him and his works, published by an American publisher. And there are still copies about, and I bought one or two, and it doesn't sell wildly these days, but nevertheless, I put one into the raffle. So whoever gets the first ticket knows what to do.
So you and Liz were now living in Blackheath?
Yes, yes. When we got married, I spent a lot of time in my lunch hour, which going up to find that mythical 29 and 6 two-room kitchen and bath flat in Hampstead, but of course there wasn't one. And my mother said, now look, Alison's buying a house in Bexley, buying a house in Bexley, and her flat will be available. And it was a basement flat in Blackheath Park, into which we moved in 1960. And until last year, I've remained on Blackheath Park or Pond Road ever since.